The Revolt of 1857, popularly known as the First War of Independence. Let's try understand why it was started to be called First War of Independence. So, the story goes 50 years ahead. Ahead of what? Of the Revolt of 1857. Now, we have to link two things here. So, I hope you all must be knowing that in 1905, the British decided to partition Bengal during the time of Lord Curzon. Now, why they wanted to do this? When in 1885 the Congress was established, the birth of Congress itself was the manifestation of the rise of nationalism in India. Now that the Indian nationalism was growing, after the birth of Congress, this nationalism became more organized. And with this, now it was kind of a threat for the British imperial interest in India. Keeping all this in mind, the British wanted to weaken Indian nationalism. So, they played their tested card of divide and rule, this time on its cultural basis. When I say cultural basis, they tried to divide the Indian society on religious or cultural grounds, and in this way they started the process through Partition of Bengal, whereby they tried to ensure that the Muslim dominated East Bengal should be separated from Hindu dominated West Bengal. Now, to continue with the process, in 1906 the British helped create the Muslim League, and then in 1909, while they passed the Minto-Morley reforms, they gave separate electorate to the Muslims. So, it was a very clear-cut planned strategy on part of the British in India to divide Indian society, to weaken Indian nationalism. But do we know what was the reaction and response of the Indian nationalists to this? So, the answer is rise of revolutionary trends. And the Partition of Bengal was one of the biggest causes behind the rise of these revolutionary trends. What are these revolutionary trends? The secret organizations like Anushilan Samiti, Dhaka Samiti, Abhinav Bharat, they started targeting the British officers. The cult of assassination began. The British officers were targeted and killed. Now, the British fear. But along with passing some stringent legislations like Secret Meetings Act, Explosive Substances Act and Newspaper Acts, they wanted to play a psychological game as well. Now, what was that psychological game plan? They declared that 1907 is going to be celebrated all over India and even in England as the 50 years of the crushing of Sepoy Mutiny of 1857. They were trying to impress upon the Indian people that in 1857 it was nothing but just a Sepoy mutiny, that the soldiers were annoyed for what? For the introduction of simply the greased cartridges, and even that was a rumor, and thus there was a revolt in India. But see, the British were so strong that they could crush it. Now that if we could crush that revolt, and now in 1907 if the Indian nationalists are again trying to bring back the same idea of revolution, mind it, we are capable enough to undo it, to defeat it, to suppress it. Now that the British try to celebrate their glory of crushing the Sepoy mutiny, the Indian nationalists have to react to it. They have to give a counter narrative to this, and this comes through the platform of India House. Now, what is India House? In London, Shamaji Krishna Verma, one of a very renowned nationalist, established an association and called like-minded people to join hands with him. For example, Madan Lal Dhingra, Lala Hardyal of Gadar Party, V.D. Savarkar. In one of such meetings in India House in London, V.D. Savarkar gave the idea that the revolt of 1857 should not be considered anything but the First War of Independence. So, this name First War of Independence came in 1907, 50 years after the events of 1857. So, it was a counter argument to argue against the British logic that 1857 was nothing but just a Sepoy mutiny. However, in the recent times, there was a lot of debate that whether 1857 be called the First War of Independence or the Paika Bidroh of 1817 that happened in Odisha. We will understand this in some other video. Best of luck.